Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the Connected Cafe. It's Friday night, the 25th of October. So glad you're here. I've been looking forward to this all day. Nikhil, Goyal, and Nielsen are here, and we're going to talk connected learners. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you for having us.
So glad you're here. I'm coming live from reinvented.org at Black Mountain College. At one point in time, I actually thought both of you would be here, and that would have been really fun. We're missing you. But sure hope that we'll find somebody to connect with you both later in a physical way. There's so much going on for Connected Educator Month. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's just sort of unbelievable, the volume of content. Hope that you've enjoyed some of the things going on. We've had great conversations here, and I love this format. There will be no badge tonight because they did not send me the badge code. So I apologize. I know that's probably why the small number of people who are here live are actually probably here just for the badges, but you're going to have to live without. Okay. Click to the left of the map on the star icon. Click on map. This is a great pairing. Not by chance, that's for sure. I'm kind of becoming converted to the badges. I've been such a skeptic, not because I'm excited about badges in a holistic way, but for teacher certification or the ability to show that they have attended an online session, the badge is actually a pretty decent way of doing that.
I'm a fan of badging.
You are?
I am. Some people are surprised by that, but I like it.
Well, let's talk about that. I'll put that on the list of things to talk about in my Evernote note. Okay, so we're a little concentrated here, aren't we? East, northeast?
Yes.
Anyway, wherever you're from, if you're listening to the recording, thanks for taking the time. Okay, so this is how this works. The idea here is that each of you have 5 minutes to kind of give a description of yourselves. This is not the deep think, we'll get to that later, but this is just kind of an overview of who you are, of your history, how you got to where you are now, and enough that we might learn something about you that we didn't know. So Nikhil, let's start with you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. So just a quick overview of some of the work I'm doing. So I graduated from high school, Sasson High School, in January of 2013. I published a book last year called One Size Does Not Fit All, and now I'm working on my second book, which is focusing on profiling some of the most extraordinary schools in the world, as well as profiling some autodidacts and self-directed learners, and trying to understand what the main functions and components of a true and profound learning experience is like. Yeah, so I write for Forbes, NPR, and a few other sites, and I'm really, really interested in seeing how we can create city as a school models where we really move learning away from school buildings and move them into the community and into the town square. So using informal learning spaces, community centers, libraries, maker spaces, all these amazing resources that are at our fingertips now to create these flourishing learning experiences for young people. So I'm very much involved with that, and I really appreciate having you having me here today.
Always a pleasure, Nikhil. Okay, so let me ask you some questions. You're a voracious book reader. You make my book reading list look paltry. What have you read lately that you just loved?
Let's see. So I've been reading Bowles and Gintis, Schooling in Capitalist America. So that's really opened my eyes to some of the functions. It's very, they call it, I think Bowles and Gintis are these two Marxist social theorists that published a book 2 decades ago. And it kind of opened my eyes to the hidden curriculum and how schools are really, were designed to create this underclass of people and keep them in that place and never let them advance up the social ladder. So that's been pretty interesting. Let's see. I've been reading a little bit more of Ivan Illich, so kind of an overview of deschooling society as well as tools of conveniality, I think, and trying to understand some of the functions of that as well.
Isn't it kind of stunning that he describes learning webs in deschooling society?
Yeah, no, it's actually amazing that there's so many things that he is discussing that are just so relevant, more so than ever before. And yeah, I think like he predicted basically the functions of the internet, like matching people up by their interests and who they are, and if they needed to find an expert in some way. So I think it'd be fascinating if he was alive today, what he would say about the internet and the way our society is running today.
Okay, I want to get back to that when we do the drill down, because that's a perfect segue into another topic. But before we do so, okay, I'm interested in this, how do you create school models that move things into the town square? Here's my take on the progressive dilemma, right? The progressive dilemma is finding better ways and then mandating them just as previous systems have been mandated before. How do you get around the progressive dilemma? How do you reshape the idea of where learning takes place without having one group mandate it for another group?
Well, I think it's mandated in what way? Like going to school or?
Okay, so yeah, so we had Milton Chen on.
Yeah.
And he described this sort of vision of these learning spaces in cities, or these sort of embedded learning spaces. And my question was, who builds those? Right. So if the answer is the people who are currently running schools, well, isn't that actually kind of part of the problem? So if it's not the people running schools, what group is it, and who decides what gets built? And is it actually a democratic grassroots process, or is it just another kind of top-down, different group mandating, but still a top-down mandate?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at a conference in September with a bunch of people that worked in museums as well as big foundations. And so I was asking a few of them the question, so how can we get a lot of these informal learning spaces more prevalent in cities and communities? And most of these people, most of the foundation heads, they were saying it really comes from the foundations. It comes from various wealthy philanthropists or various organizations that are assigned to create these spaces. And yeah, I think it is a little bit counterintuitive when you say that here are these spaces that are coming about by the people that are already in schools. I mean, there's a space in San Francisco called Free Space, and they basically converted this warehouse. This was this abandoned warehouse that was just sitting there. The seller was trying to get rid of it, but they couldn't. And they just he gave it to these group of people, and they created something called Free Space where rent was just $1 a month. And they created civic hacking, places for people to communicate, have events, they could hang out, they socialize, code, whatever you might be. So I'm seeing that there is this kind of grassroots approach, especially in the entrepreneurship community, to get these spaces out there. But I mean, I really do think it would have to take a wealthy person or big foundation or somebody major, like for example, like an Andrew Carnegie. Like he helped fund hundreds and hundreds of libraries around the country. We need somebody like that today to jumpstart these maker spaces, these community centers, these libraries, because I think those are the most extraordinary learning experiences for young people. And not only that, they revive communities. I mean, look at Detroit. One of my friends' name is Jeff Sturgis, and he started two maker spaces in Detroit. One of them is a hackerspace, and it's completely transformed some of the people that are in that community because they finally have a place to go that is safe, that is accessible, where they have freedom, and they have tools to tinker with, to build and construct things, and it contributes to their daily lives. So I think these spaces really do need to be funded, and we do need major people and foundations to get around this.
I just love talking to you. So I'm going to push back, right? Okay, so the current role of foundations right now is not necessarily in the direction that you've described. Some of it is, but a lot of it is around testing and analytics. And arguably, if you look back in the 1920s, the role of foundations was sort of seminal into the creation of our current system. So let me propose an alternative and tell me, from your perspective, with all the research you've done, how you'd feel about it. So food is an essential part of my health, right? So if I can eat well, I can be healthy, in the same way that learning is an essential part of my contributing as a citizen. And if I want to eat, I can go to a farmer's market, I can go to a traditional supermarket, I can go to a restaurant. I have a variety of choices. Doesn't the idea of learning match food enough that we might consider, this is, I mean, as tough as it is, and as much as we have sort of knee-jerk reactions to the idea of a sort of a free market, doesn't that actually argue for more of a free market approach to where you get your learning?
Yeah, no, it's a very valid point, and it's interesting because I was just reviewing, I was going over John Gatto's stuff and his books, just for fun, and that's really what he was advocating for. What he was saying is that if we just have this kind of free market libertarian approach where it's just free for all, where we just have private companies and private organizations create these spaces, then it'll be all great. And that's where I disagree with him a little bit. I do think that private institutions and private organizations can definitely contribute to this. But if we don't work towards the public good and for all people, regardless of your socioeconomic condition, then we're going to leave out so many people out of this. The great thing about makerspaces, for example, is that they're extraordinarily egalitarian. So it doesn't matter whether you are a community college dropout or you're a Harvard graduate. You're on an equal footing. What matters is the skills and the knowledge that you bring to the table, and I think that's where the world is heading towards more so. So I do think we have to be working towards the public good for all people, not just for a select few people who can afford it. And that's why I think there is some issues with that kind of libertarian mindset, because we often leave out the poorest of the poor, the people who really do need these kind of services and these programs the most. And like I was mentioning in Detroit, the people that are coming to these makerspaces, they're probably not people that have access to enrichment programs like summer camps and violin lessons. These are people that don't have access to anything after going to school. And I think those are the people we really need to be catering to and giving more access to.
I can't have this conversation with just anybody. I mean, Gatto, right? Okay, so Nikhil, I did ask another question. Okay, so Gatto's argument, if I'm reading him correctly, would be we actually had higher literacy before we had public education.
Right.
And we don't do a good job right now serving the underserved. So is there truth to that, do you think?
Yeah, no, that's one of the things I've been researching for my second book on, especially in terms of literacy rates. And what I found was that Gatto is absolutely on the ball. What they found is that literacy rates in Massachusetts, for example, was around 97–98% before compulsory schooling was initiated. And in 1995, 2000, there was a number of statistics that were released that found that the literacy rates were lower than what they were back then. And we even have to understand that back then, people were not just reading basic things. They were not watching reality television. They weren't reading U.S. Weekly or watching TMZ. They were reading pretty difficult and complex literature. They were reading Thomas Paine, Thomas Paine's Common Sense. They were reading newspapers and pamphlets. Alexis Tocqueville, I was reading his book, Democracy in America, and what he said was that America, he found, was one of the most educated societies he'd ever come across. And this was no accident. This was because we had a vibrant civic life. People engaged in town halls and debate and discourse. They read newspapers. Education was a community-wide effort. It wasn't enclosed into school buildings. The church did have a role, as well as families. So this was a community-wide effort, and I think that's why people were so much more educated and literate back then. And just one other point, students, at least young people, did not go to school from the time they were at age 5 until they were around 17, 18, or even college, for example. There was no such thing as adolescence. After they reached a certain age, around like 12, 13, they went off to do an apprenticeship or work in some kind of activity where they learned skills in the trades. So we weren't coddled. We weren't treated like children. We were treated like adults and given responsibility and treated like professionals. So there was a lot of amazing things that were happening back then, but I don't want to romanticize it as in that this was just this glorious period that we can go back to. There are things we can learn from this, but we also have to understand that African Americans, minorities, and women did not even have basic privileges and rights. But I think we can definitely learn and glean a lot of the lessons from that time period.
Okay, speaking of which, and Lisa, you've been so darn patient. Thank you for allowing me this personal privilege. Okay, so Nikhil, speaking of which, the walkouts, are they happening? What's going on?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of student walkouts in the past year. I've been involved kind of on the sidelines. We're just helping them out, especially the students. So in various cities across the country, there have been walkouts and boycotts on issues like high-stakes testing, on school closings, on privatization, all these different issues. And these have been led primarily by students. In Portland, students walked out. In Seattle, students and teachers walked out on the math test. In Providence, Rhode Island, students made some adults in the community take the same graduation test that they were required to, and over 60%, I think it was always over 60% of the adults failed the test. So there was a lot of activism. There's been a lot of activism among young people. My only worry is that, and what I'm realizing is that these protests and these forms of activism can only go so far. And I think they're not looking at the big picture. I mean, this is this is one of the focuses I write about in my new book. And I start off by saying that testing, charter schools, privatization, teachers unions, almost all the debate you see in the mainstream media, it's important, but it's not the fundamental issue, and it's not the issue we should be allocating most of our time to. What we should be allocating most of our time to is understanding and trying to reinvent the very institutions of schooling. We should be trying to change the inhumane practices that schooling has on children. That's the real tragedy. That's the thing we should be working to. Testing is important, but remember, most of these changes have only come in the past decade, a little over a decade, and we have to the main structures of the main fundamental problem of education, the fact that schools are largely unhealthy places for children, that they rob them of their freedoms and their rights, they don't give them control and the autonomy. Those things have always been around since the beginning of time. So I think we should be dedicating most of our time to that. Certainly activism is great, but I think we need to have a much broader conversation on teaching and learning and the structure of schooling.
Oh, can't wait to drill down. Lisa, you're so kind, but we are not letting you off the hook. Okay, so Nikhil, thank you for that. We're going to come back, but yeah, Lisa, let's do the quick overview of your background so we can move into some deeper questions.
Okay, the quick overview. Well, I'll start with the beginning and take me back a little bit. I hear an echo. I think maybe Nikhil, if you could untalk yourself. Sure. Okay, thanks. So I'm currently the Director of Digital Literacy and Citizenship for the New York State Department of Education. I became passionate about that because we were not able to tell the stories of real educators, real schools, and real students. And I think for me, just as in the light of Connected Educator Month and the topic of personalized learning, this is incredibly important that we take back the right to tell our stories. And that's what I get to do in my current role. And that's also why, Steve, I was excited to be able to talk with you tonight, with Nikhil, because I think our student stories are so important. And I like hearing a lot about what Nikhil was sharing as far as the sort of work that he's doing today, telling his stories with a book, and other students like him and all their work. I know that they're doing a lot of writing and speaking, and I think that's wonderful. So I think that's where that's the me I will share today.
That's not hardly enough. Don't worry, we've got lots to ask you and to drill down. Okay, so Nikhil was kind of channeling Peter Gray. He didn't call schools a prison outright, but Peter Gray does. And Lisa, what's your challenge? So Lisa, how do you have to be careful about talking about this? And if you're able to talk about it, what's your sort of feeling about that characterization?
Actually, you're hitting on something that I'm having a very fun time focusing on right now at the Department of Education. One of the things I feel is so important, not just for educators, but also for their students, is that schools should not feel like a sentence, but it should be a place to do what I call finding their sentence. And I ask educators for themselves and for their students to find that one sentence or headline that really identifies who they are, and then work really hard to brand themselves both in life, face-to-face, and online to exemplify that person that they want to be. So I think the way that I'm talking about that today in my actual job at the Department of Ed is how can we help students find their sentence, find that headline, and figure out who the person they are online is, who they want to be. And I also talk to them about how important it is for us to help our students be connected students, because in order for students today to have success in college, career, academics, internship, they need to be connected. And I find, you know, Nikhil was talking a little bit about the infantilization of youth, and I've been talking to a lot of teachers and students lately, and it's so unusual for even high school students to have jobs during the school year, do internships or apprenticeships. And that's another thing that I'm helping students and teachers work on, is how to have that online brand that gets them that part-time job that will really help them figure out who it is that they want to be, and back to your initial question, find their sentence or their headline.
I love that play on words. That's so like you. Hey, Tom DeBoer is here. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back to that exact thought. Tom, do you want to give us a little bit of a report on what's going on tomorrow?
Sure. Actually, I'll go a little bit beyond tomorrow. And first of all, I want to say hi to Nikhil. It's been about a year since we last virtually saw each other. I was the moderator for the students panel last year that you were a headliner for. So great to see you again. And I guess, you know, the thing that's exciting to me most about tomorrow is I love EdCamp, and I know many of you do too. And there have been a number of EdCamps on the schedule for this month. EdCamp has been doing its part to try and use its unique capabilities to get more educators connected through Connected Educator Month. But tomorrow, I think from 12:30 to 2:30, they have an EdCamp online using sort of an unhangout capability that MIT has developed with the MacArthur folks at Educator Innovator, all three of those groups coming together to do a Google Unhangout that is supposed to be you know, about as close as we can get to EdCamp online as opposed to EdCamp, the blended experience. And just because they have been so supportive of CEM and getting more educators connected, I hope a lot of folks will turn out, if nothing else, out of curiosity to see what this new sort of overlay on Google Plus looks like, but also just to support EdCamp. We love those guys, and we hope they have a great event. I think sort of on Sunday, since we won't get a chance to talk tomorrow, the INACOL conference is starting, and although much of that is a physical conference, there are a number of free webinars that you can get and the discussions you can participate in. That is the Blended and Online Learning Conference, which will be going from the 28th to the 30th. Some part of it does start on Sunday. Sort of looking ahead to next week, I think the thing that's interesting to me, obviously we're going to have a bunch of closing events. There are tons of events on the calendar for Monday through Thursday. We'll be introducing a bunch of collaborative projects for us to work together on after CEM that sort of come out of a lot of discussions that have occurred during the month. But it's also going to take a kind of an international flavor, which I'm really happy about, because it's going to feel kind of like a global conversation to end the month. There will be some folks from the Mozilla Foundation reporting out of a conference in London. Sorry about the phone. We will have live streaming of a number of events from the WISE Foundation's conference in Qatar on the 29th, 30th, and 31st. You'll also have the ability to ask questions of the speakers in advance of those sessions and see if they'll answer them during their sessions. The BETT conference in Latin America, which is on the 31st and the 1st, they're going to be giving us access to several sessions as well. Richard Collada, who's sort of the main person responsible for CEM this year, for making it happen at the Department of Education, will be one of the speakers at the BETT conference, and we will have access to his session as one of the 3 that we're getting from there. So it's going to be kind of, like I said, a global sort of conversation to end the month, which I think is great, a collaborative conversation to end the month, and sort of give us things to continue to work on together after CEM. We've said all along we want this year's CEM. We don't want to have to answer the question, what happens next. We want to have an answer for that. And there are a number of events that will continue on the calendar after the 1st, a number of activities that continue on, and we're going to start some up as well, so that CEM this year is a beginning. It's a kickoff, not an end in itself. We're not folding our tents on the 31st. We're just going to celebrate a little on that day and sort of take stock of where we are and what we've learned for the month. So that's my sort of vague update for now.
Celebrate and sleep, Tom?
Yep.
I don't know if you heard my joke, but celebrate and sleep, right?
Celebrate and sleep, yes. Right in time for, isn't daylight savings, we get an hour extra sleep that night or something?
I think we all need it.
Yeah, no, it's been a very, but I've worried sometimes people are, that there's too much and people have sort of been completely saturated, but then I hear reports of some really good events that have happened the last couple of days with good crowds and lots of lively discussions. I know every night the discussions here are great, and all of them are being archived, and lots of people want to get access to the archives, because we all know that teachers just don't, they don't have time to attend a lot of these sessions live. The more of those things that we can get together, we'll get them onto the calendar. This year we have direct links to the archives from the calendar, and then of course we'll be compiling, full text searchable, tagged by topic, tagged by event type, tagged by audience archives that will be added to 2012. So you'll have 2 years worth of, because a lot of the stuff that happened in 2012 is evergreen. It hasn't changed, still valuable now. You'll have 2 years worth of archives that you can use either to get inspired all over again by what you heard, get the sessions that you didn't get to hear, and pass along to your less connected friends and see if we can get them inspired to get involved as well.
Tom, thank you so much. We're having a great discussion here. We're having a great conversation here. We're just going to keep moving forward. Okay, Lisa, here's my question, right? Both the Common Core with the student data tracking and your description of a student finding a sentence concern me at one level. And here's the concern. The concern is the difficulty of changing, right? So it feels like one of the great things that happens to us as individuals is that our interests change, or we find that we reach a dead end, and we kind of reinvent ourselves. And does the need to find your sentence, how do you balance that with the need to sometimes let the sentence go and find a whole new one?
I don't think, and this is something that comes up all the time when I talk about personalized learning and following passions. I think one of the easiest ways to respond to that is if we think about what percentage of people went into the career that they graduated college, what their college major was, and it's not a large percentage. So to me, what's important is to really help students or teachers, just anybody, figure out what their sentence is, and knowing the tools that it takes and the strategies to pursue that which is important to you, to become connected as an educator or a student. And once you learn those strategies, you can apply them to whatever it is you're interested in. I mean, most people that are here listening to me right now know that I am passionate about progressive education, but I have other passions. One is beach volleyball, and I have a whole connected community with volleyball, and my newest is my dogs, and I started a great community with other people who have dogs. So I think that what's important is to help our students and teachers learn the strategies and skills necessary to connect and to find their sentence, no matter what that happens to be.
Okay, awesome. And you talked about students having a job during the year. And I'm going to direct this toward Nikhil, because here I am at Black Mountain Soul. It's this sort of self-organized learning environment, and it's this idea of students kind of learning to be self-directed. And it feels to me like there's a fair amount of navel-gazing that takes place here. And I almost want to say, you should all go out and get a job. You should be working 10 or 15 hours a week at least, just because there's something to the requirement of working. And I'm listening to David and Goliath, the new Malcolm Gladwell book, and I'm sort of loving the degree to which he's reminding us that a lot of good things come out of hard things and hard work. So Nikhil, what's your take on the job, navel-gazing balance?
It's interesting because I think, like I mentioned, before the year 1900, most kids, when they turned around 12, 13, went to get a job. And like Lisa was talking about, the infantilization of youth, what it's caused is that our child has basically become extended. So we become more coddled. Adolescents are just become so shielded from the outside world. The few jobs that teenagers have are often not very meaningful. They're like at a fast food restaurant, or they're babysitting, or dog walking. It's not very, very meaningful. They're not very rich in skills and experiences. There's a great model of schooling that some of you may be familiar with, Big Picture Learning. And what they do is that this network of schools started by Elliot Washer and Dennis Lipke, what they've said is, what they've created are these types of schools where kids spend most of their days in various jobs, doing internships, apprenticeships, volunteer opportunities. I think there's no reason why we can't have young people in jobs and in these kind of positions. Just to emphasize, you're making money. I mean, people, especially in these socioeconomic conditions where their parents are working, where they don't have, where both of their parents are working, where they don't have, they're in poverty. These are tremendous opportunities for you to make some money and help your family out. And I'm not saying this is child labor. This is not going back to when we had children working in factories. These are opportunities for young people to be engaged and be part of something bigger than themselves. And for example, employers, I think, would be so enthralled by having young people working with them. At first, it may seem a little bit uneasy. I mean, that's definitely going to happen. But if you're going to have a young person that you're going to pay a little bit of money to per each hour, or it could be a volunteer opportunity, you could have that person and say they're really interested in that field and they want to pursue that. You could have that person and tie them for their career. Like they could be as part of that company once they graduate college or once they finish school. I mean, Google, for example, they try to have the internships at Google often lead to jobs later on. In Germany, they have various apprenticeship programs where you're working in this company, you don't go to college, and you're basically guaranteed a job if you just work there for a few years. It's on-the-job training, you're getting skills, and you're getting experience. And so I think this notion of extending childhood and creating this artificial period called adolescence is very harmful because it causes students to eliminates old options that students can have to have those meaningful experiences in the workplace. And I think we need to marry the two circumstances, the more traditional academic kind of situation with the job training. I think there shouldn't be any kind of separation between the two. I think they should be married together.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so the domain of one's own. I'm definitely we'll connect on that at a later point in time. Okay, let's move to a question that's really on my mind and see how the two of you respond. And then I'm going to give you each a chance to talk about something you're deeply interested in. So, Gandhi used the spinning wheel as a symbol for people reclaiming, low-income village people in India reclaiming their economic lives. Right? It was a simple symbol that said you don't have to give your economic life away to someone else who's taking your raw materials and selling you back the finished goods. In the food arena, it's kind of grow your own garden, right? In the school arena, you hear start your own school, you hear homeschooling, but is there a simple symbol that reflects this ability to take control back of your learning? And I'll take either of you in response.
I'm not doing a good job of responding here to think of one symbol. It's interesting because it's something that I remind parents all the time. Who should control the learning of your child, you and your child or the government? And they're just very confused by the idea that they should have any right to own the learning of their own child. And I see like this little light go off in their head that they do deserve to own that. But as far as a symbol of that, I'll have to think about that a little harder.
Can you repeat the last part of the question, the symbol part?
Well, just that Gandhi's symbol, the spinning wheel, was very understandable by people, even at the lowest economic level, to reclaim their own work lives. And certainly, we're preaching to the choir if we just talk about the students who are doing well and the parents who are engaged and involved. How would we communicate to those students who are completely disengaged, to where the parents are also disengaged, this importance of reclaiming the learning journey rather than somebody else directing it?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very important question. I mean, what I would say, especially to parents, is that right now what's happening in school, probably not all schools, but most schools, what they're doing outside of school is probably much more valuable to their lives, and it's much more meaningful to them than what's happening in school. That I would argue that for the parents that have basically no idea what to do, say their kid is so disengaged in school, they're so bored, you have to ask yourself, you have to ask your child, what are you interested in? And every child is something they're passionate about. There's something that makes them excited every time they're engaged in that activity. And I think parents have a tremendous role by giving them that autonomy and giving them that freedom. I think oftentimes school does get in the way with that. I mean, I would try to find ways, especially in high school, there are options for like independent studies where people can start pursuing what they want to do on school time. In some schools, fortunately, they give credit for that. My school didn't, but there are some schools that do. So I would say that for the kids who are so bored to death, there are options for you. I mean, you don't necessarily need to leave the school system, but you can if you choose. There are democratic and free schools available. These are schools where children are self-directing their learning. They're given freedom to learn at whatever pace they want. There's no grades. There's no tests. There's no homework. There's no required classes. There's unschooling options. There's homeschooling options. And oftentimes, this is for parents who are privileged, people who come from privileged backgrounds. But for those who don't necessarily come from those backgrounds, who don't have the option to homeschool or unschool their children, there are options and resources available in many communities, like makerspaces, after-school programs, places where people can hack and tinker and code, computer clubs. If you just look in your community and try to find other like-minded parents that are engaging in this, then you can have those opportunities and make them flourish. I think self-directed learning is not expensive. It's very, very accessible and very cheap with all the resources that are at fingertips. You have libraries, you have makerspaces, you have the internet. There should be no reason. There should be no reason why you shouldn't be able to do self-directed learning. And I think if you give children that freedom, you give them that autonomy, there's no reason they won't rise up to the occasion and impress you each and every time.
Okay, I'm going to give you each a chance to talk about something you're passionate about. As you're thinking about that, Nikhil, there's a woman here at the unconference I'm helping to run who's at Dale Stevens College. And her sort of perspective is that Dale doesn't understand that not everybody is as much an autodidact as he is.
Right.
How do you address the fact that people have different levels of sort of self-startedness?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. So I get this a lot where people say, "Oh, my child needs that kind of structured environment. There's no reason they can't be a self-directed learner or an autodidact. People who are just learning without formal institutions." And I think it's a very valid question. What I would say, especially with young people, you can't just say that a child cannot flourish in an unstructured environment if you've never had an opportunity if they've never had an opportunity to actually be in that kind of environment. At the Brooklyn Free School, there's a great term. It's called detox. And what kids go through, the ones who come from the public school system, they have to go through a period of detox where they have to completely unlearn everything they learned in formal schooling. And it may take a few months. It may take a long time for them to get off all those harmful and toxic effects that schooling has done to them. But once they get out of that detox period, now they come back to their natural stage of learning. And it's extraordinary because self-directed learning flourishes in that situation. So I would say it's difficult to become a self-directed learner if you've gone through 13 years of schooling and then 4 years of college where somebody's told you what to do all the time. It's very difficult to just get away from all that structure and all that requirements. So I think, yes, in some cases there is some validity in the argument that not every person is an autodidact at that age, but I think every person is born an autodidact. Every person is born a self-directed learner. Young people are extraordinary learners. Deborah Meyer says that children are experts at learning. They wouldn't be able to learn how to walk or talk if we weren't. So I think from birth we have these traits and we have these capabilities. It gets hammered and killed out of us. So that's why it can be difficult to see a child who likes that kind of structured environment become an autodidact. And on top of that, that's not to say that structured environments are always bad. What I argue is that if you want to have a structured environment to learn a subject, say you need to have a teacher lecturing at you or somebody telling you what to do, then that's your choice. But there's a difference between that and going to a structured environment where somebody's forcing you to be there. It's not from your personal will and your personal choice. So I think there is a very nuanced argument to make in this kind of situation.
Love that answer, Lisa. Some of this seems to me to be about structure, and some of it is about community. Right? Some people need kind of the community time. Maybe it's an introvert-extrovert thing. But how do you balance the need for community and the need for self-direction? And what's been your experience? Lisa, your mic is off in case you're talking.
Yeah, sorry about that. The mic helps. Can you just clarify, are you talking about in the school setting or in general?
Just in general, and sort of your perceptions of it as you explore this arena, right? I mean, we're social creatures, and so to what degree does having other people around make a difference?
So I'm going to answer this question from a school setting, since that's my background, and it's also why I think that social media is extremely important for our students today. Right now in schools, our kids are grouped by data manufacturer with people who they happen to be living by, that they may or may not have anything in common with, and who may or may not share their passions, talents, interests, etc. This is why I think that social media and for every child to have access to the internet is so important, because I do professional development all week, every week, and people tell me how fearful they are of technology disconnecting students. And I tell them these amazing stories of technology connecting students to people across the globe in powerful ways that were never before possible. And I think that the power is in the real stories of this actually taking place, because a lot of times adults think when kids are behind computers that they're not doing anything meaningful. And I think that what they actually can be doing is extremely meaningful things, which also goes back to telling our stories and giving adults some glimpse into the world of the powerful things that students can actually be doing online. So I think that it's really important to allow students to connect, and social media and the internet allows those students who might not connect as well face-to-face to have additional opportunities online, and also to allow those who do connect well face-to-face to really extend their reach online. And something I also love to tell educators is that social media allows us to meet one another's minds before we meet their faces in many cases. And it's pretty impressive to me once you develop your network, a global network even, how opportunities to meet face-to-face are more frequent, and just how opportunities are more frequent in general.
That's the whole online dating story, right?
Yes.
It is. It's fascinating, right? The number of people who are meeting their partners online. I have to believe a portion of that is the ability to get to know somebody without the physical impressions being foremost.
Yes.
Okay, about 3 minutes left. So obviously we could spend hours together, and I hope that we will. In 1 minute, Nikhil, what's something you're really thinking about or pondering or is top of mind that we haven't discussed that we should file for a later, longer conversation?
So like I think I mentioned a little bit at the beginning, I've been really fascinated by the research on the hidden curriculum and the notion that schools are keeping the middle class and the poor in their place by not letting them advance up the social mobility ladder. So yeah, I've been doing some research on that, like reading the book Schooling in Capitalist America. There's a lot of other research on this, where one professor found that there's certain characteristics in classrooms that help that will cause somebody to be part of a certain social class. So in the more wealthier elite schools, they were taught initiative and leadership, while in the poorer working class schools, they were taught obedience and submission. So there's that's been a lot of discussion in the past few decades, especially with a lot of economists and social theorists. It's something I really want to look into a lot bit more. Ivy Noack talks about how there's two hidden curriculums. The first hidden curriculum that most people know, like I mentioned, is how we inculcate social traits within children so that they can be part of certain social classes, like obedience and punctuality and and submission. And the other hidden curriculum with Ivy Noack talks about is what he calls the ritual schooling itself. What schooling does is that it separates people based on whether they went to school or not, the school from the non-schooled. So what it says is that what this kind of ritual means is that it implies that education is a result of attendance and learning is a result of teaching, and education is a result of being in a classroom and listening to a teacher and doing certain things. So it's completely, so what he argues is that we should get rid of this credentialing system. We should get rid of this social discrimination, in essence, of labeling people as uneducated just because they did not go to school. So he believes in deschooling society, where we treat these different learning networks and different places where people can learn as equal and egalitarian, where it doesn't matter whether you're learning in a library or whether you're learning in a museum or a college. They're on the same equal footing. So those are some interesting things that I've been looking at recently. And there has been not as much research today, but there was a lot of research in the 1970s and 80s on this issue.
Nikhil, I'm begging you, come to Black Mountain for a week. We'll do a public session every night. We'll do Illich, we'll do Holt, we'll do Postman, we'll do it all. I promise.
It sounds good.
Yeah, and in fact, Gatto makes some really interesting connections between Indian colonial education and the United States that I wasn't aware of at all.
Oh, where did he make that?
In Underground History of American Education.
Okay.
It's on. You can search it online because it's all online. But
yeah.
Pretty significant influence there that we are unaware of. Lisa, 1 minute. What didn't we cover that you care about?
Well, we sort of touched on it, but I'd love to focus more on real ways for students to tell their stories and to release the amazing work that kids are doing in schools into the world. Something I find all the time is teachers, I was just at a conference last week, a couple conferences last week, and teachers are sharing all the great things their students are doing, and they're trapped inside classrooms. And I think we need to really come up with some smart ways that we can release the awesomeness of kids from schools and into the world and allow them to do work that's worthy of the world, in the world, not just locked in our schools. So that's something I'm really passionate about. But based on what you were just talking with Nikhil about, I'd love to come to Black Mountain for a study of some of the progressive educators like Gatto and Illich and Holt and all of that. So that would be really fun too.
We're so doing this. Hey, this was so much fun. I cannot believe it. As a courtesy to everybody, we try and end on time. I'm just thrilled with the conversation. So appreciative of both of you and your voices and this opportunity to spend time together. Thank you so much. Tom DeBoer will be mad at me, but I didn't get a code for tonight's show, so there is no badge. I apologize, but this was really fun. Thanks, Nikhil. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, follow-up emails to come. Have a great night. Bye.